First, Alexei Mozhin has been executive director for Russia for, I think, 3 decades.
Since
He's
the 90s,
outstanding.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely outstanding. So what he says we should take very seriously. And he's been the dean of the executive directors, meaning the longest serving, and he presides often at the IMF. So I have great respect for him. What he's saying is that the public debt of the US, which is now more than 100% of national income and rising rapidly, will be a source of financial crisis in the years ahead. I concur with that. We don't have any kind of political consensus in the United States about what government should do and how to fund it. So the recourse of both the Democrats and the Republicans is to run larger deficit spending. The Republicans really like tax cuts. The Democrats like various kinds of spending increases or tax credits, but both sides like war. So both sides spend fortunes on war, and the upshot is that since the year 2000, the public debt has risen from around 1/3 of national income to more than 100% of national income. The Congressional Budget Office of the United States makes long-term projections, and their long-term projection for mid-century is that the debt will rise to around 200% of GDP. That's not the precise number that they give, but essentially the ratio of debt to national income doubling. That's not a forecast so much as saying if we stay on the current trajectory. So the fact that we have no political equilibrium in this country means that the fallback option is raise the debt, and eventually that leads to crisis.
Right. I'm going to continue reading from Alexei Mozhin. What he said after that was about the BRICS and the role of the BRICS in dealing with this situation. He said the BRICS are putting together an accounting unit based on a basket of currencies of the original 5 members of the BRICS, which will include daily quotes for the main commodities. And he mentions in that regard oil, grain, gold, metals, and timber. He goes on, mutual trade will be carried out in this accounting unit. If there is a collapse, he adds, it would be necessary to turn the BRICS accounting unit into a real currency backed by exchange-traded goods. That's his quote. I'll mention that this is very close to the idea proposed by Lyndon LaRouche in the year 2000 called trade without currency, which was subsequently studied by Russian economists Sergei Glaziev and others who are planning the BRICS policies for how to deal with this global crisis, which, as you know, the Russians and the Chinese are also quite verbally warning of the severity of the global financial blowout that we're facing. So what are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, I think first, it's important to say that a number of things are in play. And one of them is that the BRICS countries want a means of settlement that isn't the US dollar. So this is one part of what's at play. And that's not even mainly because of the debt crisis in the United States. That's mainly because of the weaponization of the dollar by the United States. The US began around 20 years ago to use the currency not merely as a system of settlements for international transactions, but also as a weapon of foreign policy by seizing the assets of countries deemed to be adversarial to the US. So the United States seized the balances of Iran, seized the balances of Venezuela, of Afghanistan, and now the big one, Russia, roughly $300 billion of Russia's financial assets frozen by the Western governments. So these countries in the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now 5 more countries added, Egypt, Ethiopia, the Emirates, Iran, and we think Saudi Arabia, not entirely clear, but seems to be the case, are saying that they want to hedge against this kind of geopolitical risk. So this is one factor in this. The second factor is that the dollar itself may become unstable for the reasons that we were speaking about. I would say a third factor is that there is lots of technological change, so different ways to make settlements. The current settlement system goes through banks, but in the future, it will go through digital currencies, probably central bank digital currencies. Now, all of that then also raises questions. If you have a central bank currency, renminbi or a dollar or a ruble, how do you manage monetary policy? Should that currency be backed by a basket of commodities? If so, in what sense backed? That basket could be a price indicator for monetary policy. It could be a literal kind of gold standard where you can take your currency unit and convert it into units of some kind of commodity or basket of commodities. There are lots of technical choices, but the question is, does the central bank need some kind of anchor of a commodity to be responsible? Otherwise, the claim is sometimes made that central banks are inherently inflationary, and at the end of the day, unless the currency is backed by something, it will be inflated away. So these are the issues that Lyndon LaRouche raised. These are the issues that the BRICS are tackling right now. In my view, the order of priority for the BRICS is first not to have their foreign reserves seized by the United States or Europe, because both the US and Europe are misbehaving very badly. They are using what should be financial instruments as foreign policy adversarial instruments. This is a big mistake, and the BRICS want something else. Second is this unit of account issue. It happens that the first 5 countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, all have currencies that start with the letter R. So the Brazilian real, the Russian ruble, the Indian rupee, the Chinese renminbi, and the South African real, and all of it. So they call it the 5R. The rand, I'm sorry, excuse me. They call it the 5R currency unit.
That's a term that apparently Mogen came up with that idea.
Yeah, I also talked about that in recent years.
Oh, okay.
I just found it an amazing coincidence
Yeah, right.
that they're all. But in any event, Alexei is carrying the ball on this. So there's lots of good ideas to have a unit of account. And I think there's an interest among these major countries to do that. And they're working pretty hard on this right now, and I'm in favor of it. Yeah. I think there's nothing wrong with having some alternatives. I keep saying to American policymakers, stop wrecking the dollar, stop weaponizing the dollar, stop seizing other countries' assets. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you want the dollar to be used, you can't use it like a punching bag this way.
I'm sure you know that there's now bills in the Congress and discussion to not just freeze the Russian money, but to use at least the interest earned from it to literally hand it over to the Ukrainian war. So
well, this is part of the this is part of the aid legislation, not aid, this is part of the military spending that was passed last month,
Right.
is directing some kind of seizure of Russia's assets. Plainly illegal, but also plainly stupid.
Yeah,
But
that's very stupid.
I don't count on intelligence from the Congress.
Yeah, right. So as I mentioned, I watched your interview with Jill Stein. I also saw your interview with Judge Napolitano, which was very interesting, and with a man named Robert, whom I sort of surmise is connected to the Vatican.
Oh yeah, he does a show around Vatican issues.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's his name?
Moynihan, Robert Moynihan. Yeah.
Moynihan. So I found them all very interesting. I mean, it's obvious that you're making your views about the global crisis facing mankind generally as widely as you possibly can, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your agreement to do so with EIR as well.
Of course.
In particular, you have condemned both political parties, as you just mentioned, being totally pro-war, united in their insane view. And that their expected presidential candidates are fully subservient to the military-industrial complex and to war, including the war between NATO and Russia being fought with Ukrainian bodies and the horrendous genocide that's taking place in Palestine, as well as their preparation for a war with China, which I'll ask you about a bit later. All of which clearly is bringing us closer and closer to global war and probably global nuclear war. So can you expand a bit on your view of the Biden and Trump situation and the danger to the U.S.?
I think fundamentally, what is at play is the almost tectonics, like the plate tectonics on the Earth, but the tectonics of geopolitics. The United States, especially with the end of the Soviet Union in 1991, but really going back to the early days after World War II, came to believe at the highest strategic level that the U.S. Dominates the world scene, that it is the hegemon, to use the political science term, meaning the political power that effectively is in control of the world scene, and that its grand strategy should be to protect its hegemonic advantage. And sometimes this is put very explicitly, for example, in a very clear article written for the Council on Foreign Relations by Robert Blackwell and Ashley Tellis in 2015, where those two authors, senior analysts, one a very senior U.S. diplomat, discuss what U.S. policy towards China should be. And the article says very bluntly and clearly, the U.S. grand strategy is to be number one. And if China's rise threatens the U.S. being number one, the U.S. needs to take action to curb China's rise. Well, to my mind, this is the fundamental issue in the world scene today. The U.S., and by that I mean the military-industrial blob or complex or small number of powerful people from the security establishment, the intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, the military companies, and their supporters in the Congress. That group wants to preserve American hegemony as they see it. But the real issue is Russia is a powerful, technologically sophisticated country. China is a very powerful, very technologically sophisticated country. And not surprisingly, neither Russia nor China nor most countries around the world want a hegemon. What they want is, in large part, to be left alone so that they can get on with their lives. But they would like peace. They really do want global cooperation. They just don't want the U.S. to tell them what to do. The US, on the other hand, resents Russia for being big and powerful. The US has a completely neurotic fixation on China. Again, when I say the US, I mean real individuals at the top of the power structure in the US. I don't mean American society as a whole. And why we are slipping towards World War III is that America's self-image as hegemon is completely inconsistent with the ground reality, which is Russia's powerful, China's powerful, other regional powers are powerful, and they don't want American dominance, period. So when the United States government declared already in the late 90s, but then committed in the year 2008 that it would expand NATO to Ukraine, Russia said, no, not on our border. We don't want you next door. It's obvious that if China said we're going to start putting military bases along the Rio Grande, it would trigger a kind of reaction in Washington, not saying, oh, that's just fine. You do what you want.
We saw the response when the Cubans moved, when the Russians moved into Cuba. We already saw the nuclear war.
We ran that show once, but
right.
One of the points about the U.S., just to digress for one moment, is that our senior officials absolutely refuse even to try to think like the other side might think and to take that into account, much less to reflect on it and use that reflection as a way to stay out of disaster. We absolutely reject that. We do what we want, and we expect others to do what we want. And so what you raised, the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the risk of catastrophic war in East Asia, in my mind, it all comes down at the core to this US demand, you do it our way or we'll have war. And the US ends up getting in a lot of disastrous wars. It gets millions of people killed because of this kind of approach. And we're in the midst of it now. Biden obviously doesn't know where the brakes are. I don't know if he knows where anything is right now. Trump is an odd character, of course, utterly unpredictable. He had neocons and he had anti-neocons in his administration doing very haphazard things. And it's probably true he would be less pro-NATO in Ukraine, but he was absolutely up for goading China and as aggressive as can be pro-Israel in the Middle East. So all of it is to say, in my view, there's not so much difference at the political personality level. Structurally, the U.S. Security establishment is fighting for its hegemony, and it could end up creating a world war.